Hello, everyone. My name is Bernard Marr. That noise you're hearing. Sorry, that noise you're hearing is my ventilator. Welcome to Page Turners They Were Not. My Star Wars podcast in this episode of The Guest Awakens. It was going to be guests, but joining us is my good friend John Wilcox from the Nerdherder podcast. Hey, John, how you doing?
Good, buddy. How are you?
Well, it's an interesting story. I was sick a few months ago and still getting over it. So,
I definitely understand. I've had
yeah.
another bout of congestion and ick here lately myself. I think it's this all this back and forth weather.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Though, I mean, if you want to escape the winter, come out this way.
Right. And
You
maybe
and Cooper can come hang out with me and
right.
enjoy the 60-degree weather.
If it could be in the 60s all year long, I would be a very happy man.
Indeed. So, as I mentioned, yeah, Cooper is not joining us. They got called into work the last minute. Crazy weather, crazy work schedules, illness. We we've been trying to get this episode going for
Quite
a
a
few
while.
months now. Um,
Yep.
but very gratefully, we have it going. So, yay.
Yep. Finally.
And just tell Cooper that we're thinking about her then and can't wait to have them on the show too.
For sure.
Yeah.
Definitely.
All right. Well, our conversation is finding hope and joy in Star Wars. And I can't think of a more time appropriate conversation. Oddly enough, I think when we were originally going to have this conversation, it was before the election and before certain things went down.
Yeah.
And the timing could not be more appropriate. Yeah, some of you may be aware that something major happened yesterday that we don't want to talk about. But unfortunately, it's
It's
not something we can just ignore. So that's all I've got to say about that.
yeah.
But I think that Star Wars, if we go back to the beginning, has always been about hope. That has always been the message. And the there's certainly all the movies and all the shows in one way or another have been about hope. Um, even Andor, as dark as that gets. But speaking of, we just ended Skeleton Crew, which was nice to see that most of the fans were enjoying it, quite a bit.
For sure.
And that's not always been the case
Right.
with every show. So, since I haven't gotten to talk to you, John, in a while, let's give us your thoughts, kind on Skeleton as a whole.
Um, yeah, I'll say that in even my circle, because I work with a bunch of nerds since I work at a shop now. And sometimes we have different takes healthily on Star Wars and other things. But Skeleton Crew was one of those we were all very on the same page, all enjoying and excited for and everything. Um, I really liked it. I really had a lot of fun with Skeleton Crew. It was nice to have Star Wars that was a little bit simpler in its approach to the story because it very much felt like Star Wars. It didn't feel dumbed down or lesser than, um, but it felt definitely like it was the most distilled approach to it. And I don't know if that's with featuring, the young people in the main part of the cast and everything, gearing more towards kids and families, um, which has always kind of been a focus. George talked a lot about that it was kind of made for a specific group, made for kids to inspire them. And I think that kind of vibe to it as well. Um, Still very fun, still lots of action, still uh, lots of inspiration, even. Um, you know, it's a very well-rounded show. I liked it a lot.
Yeah, I did too. I described it as delightful. That's really what it is. And
Mhm.
and
That's the
I
word.
absolutely love the pulpy, silly side of Star Wars.
For sure.
Because I think that, and we talked about this, as much as we all love Andor, it might be missing a bit of that goofiness. Skeleton Crew had um, weird looking creatures and strange locations and used a lot of old fashioned special effects
For sure.
amazingly well.
Absolutely.
And that was great. The kids were magnificent.
They all did a
Uh,
good job.
it's very difficult to make a series with a bunch of kids and not have them be kind of annoying. And this show did a great job. Obviously, John Watts is very good with working with younger actors, and that came through very well. And also, of course, we have to tip our hats to Jude Law,
Mm,
who is, as always, magnificent. And I won't spoil it for those listening who have not seen it. But some of the story beats went in a different direction than we might have thought from the beginning. I mean, obviously, we'd all seen the trailers, the Goonies, and the Southards, 80s feel.
hmm
And then they add a great dose of Pirates of the Caribbean, of Indiana Jones, of even things like Flight of the Navigator
mm.
and the Never Ending Story and other great 80s callbacks.
Oh yeah.
And a story that was very full of heart. Um, and there's a line from near the end, and I won't say who, but one of the characters says, everywhere we went, there were good people too. And that's a very helpful message,
For,
particularly for right now. The idea that there are good people everywhere. So,
for
and
sure.
that's wonderful. And our little podcast community, it's such a great place to be. Certainly, we have to mention our good friends. We have Eli, of course. We have Connor, we had Scotty and Jerry,
Mm-hmm. To name a few.
Second Benjamin, Alvin Diaz, Mickey Schumacher, and Jared the Dark Jedi. And above it all, you have Ken, Joseph, and Jennifer at Force Center, and Molly and Alex at Star Wars Explained. Um, Being part of this community. Though maybe our little community isn't as well known as Ken, Joseph, and Jennifer, but regardless, we would consider them honorary members of our little group. And Ken is actually a good friend of mine. And so that's been wonderful to be. And Alex and Molly are honorary members of our community too.
Mm-hmm.
And so, we have this wonderful little corner of Star Wars fans that not only are we more, not to sound boastful, but positive Star Wars fans. But also, I think with the world being like it is right now, we're kind of a community where you can get away from all that
Mm.
and just enjoy the fun of stuff. And that's the other side of the equation. Star Wars is fun. It's ridiculous and it's fun. And it's full of hope. And it was really nice to see in Skeleton Crew that sense of the silly. Our good friend Jennifer Landa from Force Center loves that side of Star Wars.
Mm-hmm.
She was one of those kids watching the Ewoks cartoon
Mm-hmm.
back in the 80s. That was. And I'm also speaking of Ewoks. She was the one who was really championing the Ewoks. When a bunch of fans were like, Ewoks.
Right.
Of course, Jennifer also reminds us that not only are they silly, but they'll roast you alive and eat you.
Exactly.
So they're not exactly, they take them lightly.
For sure.
And a certain film director who we love was of a certain age of the too cool for school teenager who thought teddy bears in Star Wars. But Skeleton Crew is kind of the great example of, let's look at the silly. Let's look at the goofy. And you have the Phillips, that big guy hanging out in the mud baths on
Oh yeah.
Skull Mountain. You had the little garbage crabs that were like repeating everything the kids said.
Mm-hmm.
You had very silly looking pirates and all the fun and goofiness that Star Wars has always been about. I mean, even the original film, the Jawas are pretty silly.
Yeah,
But
I
that's
think
part of the fun.
yeah. Well, I think if you think about any of it too long, it gets silly with Star Wars.
That's true.
Um, and I think sometimes we forget that we grow up and we want grown up stories.
Mhm.
We think that we have to get rid of the silly in order to have that. We can't, it's like it can't coexist.
Mhm.
But that's just a lie we tell ourselves. That's not true. That's, it all goes together. And I forget who had said it in such a way, but I like it and I appreciate it for how it kind of enlightens viewing Star Wars, and it's just that, you know, um, it's always a fairy tale. It's just it has different it has different strengths in certain areas depending on which part of the fairy tale you're watching. So, like,
Mm,
you mentioned Andor. Andor, that part of the fairy tale is very much uh, more focused on the knight fighting the dragon. It's much more focused on the big cataclysmic ordeal that this hero has to face.
mm,
Um, but that's part of the fairy tale. Whereas in let's say Skeleton Crew, the focus is on the kids who are living this adventure they wanted but didn't realize they weren't ready for. But they've got to learn to be ready for it. And although kids, it might be funnier and um, simpler, it's still part of the fairy tale. Um, so it's like just a board of different switches, and you just dial up the dial which one you want. Oh, we want this one to be funnier. We want this one to be more serious. We want this one to be more, science. We want this one to be more fiction. It all kind of works together to make the Star Wars that we know and love.
yeah, I agree. And I think that all of it is amazing because it's all really the same story.
Mm-hmm.
As much as people might want to say Andor is Star Wars for adults, like, well, if you watch the quote unquote kid shows,
Mm-hmm.
it's the same message. I mean, maybe the tone is different, but it's still the same story, the same message, and it all has that in it.
Yeah, because I mean, it's the kind of story that it doesn't matter how old you are. Like I said, that's the lie we believe, is that at some point you get too old for this kind of stuff, and that's not true. This It's just that the older you get, the kind of stuff changes. So, like, when you're a kid, you can understand the idea of trying to find the strength to face the bully. Uh,
Hmm.
but when you get older, you realize that that bully, it could be a person, it could be a person who is very selfish and hurt and taking it out on you, or it could be an idea. Sometimes the bully is an institution. Sometimes the bully is just the idea of selfishness itself. Um, so you're not fighting back against the big bully as much as you are fighting against the idea of selfishness and evil. Um, but
Hmm.
there's a maturity in realizing that. There's a maturity in realizing I don't have to beat a literal bad guy to win at life. I have to simply not be the bad guy, stuff like that. Like, it grows up with you, which is all part of good storytelling. You can watch the Clone Wars as a child and just be like, "Oh, cool! The Jedi are so neat and awesome," and they win the battles and blah blah blah. And then you can watch it as an adult, and you're just like, "Oh, I can understand how the Jedi are more flawed." Uh,
Mm.
you know, I'm still inspired by them, even though they aren't the perfect version I used to imagine. Like, it's the same story. The lenses just change if you're watching it and paying attention, I think.
Good point. Um, it's interesting with so the next show on the horizon is Andor season 2.
Hmm.
The only other show that we know is in existence will be Ahsoka season 2.
Mhm.
Star Wars Celebration is coming to Tokyo in a few months, and it'll be interesting to see what they announce.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm hopeful they don't overdo it. Uh, I'm
true.
uh, just Star Wars
Yeah.
and everything. I'm very much in that camp now, where I'd like less stuff with more work, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Um, I'm not angry and all on social media adding Star Wars like, hey, where's this show, where's that show, but there's been a lot of stuff announced in the past 3-4 years that most of it has happened, some of it hasn't, um and to varying degrees of success, I think, um so I'm okay if they slow down a little bit to work harder to give us good shows like Skeleton Crew. And
Mhm.
I mean, I think I'm on record already as saying I love everything Star Wars.
Yeah, me too.
Um, so it's not that they've rushed something and made something bad, and I think they should slow down. It's just that I think they have a lot of ideas. They want to do a lot of stuff, uh, and I think they have too many cooks in the kitchen working on 5 different souffles. And I think it would just be better to give us one good souffle at a time, um, because they're working with a lot of really cool stuff at the moment. Like you mentioned, Andor is going to be big. Um, I'm very excited for Ahsoka season 2 because I loved the first season so much.
Yeah.
Um, I think that's going to be a very kind of character self discovery show that I'm going to love a lot because um, that's what made it for me with season 1 was just Ahsoka becoming, I think, the great Jedi. Even though she says she's not one, the great Jedi. She says,
Let's look at the white.
yeah. um,
Hey, Lord of the Rings.
so yeah, I don't know. I hope for some good updates on like the Ray movie and stuff like that, or the Ray trilogy. I don't remember where.
Well, it depends on who you listen to, I guess.
For sure.
Since they don't seem to explain that one. So,
Yeah,
but yeah, I know it's exciting because, well, certainly we've got, finally, we have a movie that is going to happen because they're done filming The Mandalorian Grogu. That'll be great to go back to the theaters next year for some Star Wars.
it'll be very interesting seeing a character that started on TV
Yeah.
on the big screen. That's exciting.
Yes, and I should mention that my niece, I have another niece who was born on December 21st, and the first gift I got her were Star Wars clothes with Grogu on them.
Heck yeah.
That's, yeah, you gotta raise them right.
Exactly. Start them right.
Yeah, and I think that that's part of the fun too, is I think what makes Star Wars as a concept so successful is that you can watch it when you're a little kid, and then you can watch it when you're an adult. And a lot of that same feeling is still there. You might look at things a little bit differently, but just the fun of it is still there. And certainly, I think that's part of what makes it so joyous is that it really is good, fun entertainment. As they say today, wholesome. And it is so just there's an excitement to it. Certainly there's all the spaceships and then pew 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 and all the lightsabers and all those kind of neat things. And then when you're an adult, you can still enjoy those things. But you can also go, oh, what's the deeper message here?
Mm-hmm.
And that message has almost always been, yeah, there's bad guys out there, but there's a lot of good people to stop them. And that's a wonderful message that everybody, regardless of their age, can understand. Um, I don't want to draw too many parallels between what's going on right now, and just for the sake of conversation, we don't really want to go there because that's the last thing anyone wants to talk about right now. But a good acquaintance of Brooklyn, Jane Dalton, who you might know,
Mm.
posted today. There was a lot of people have been drawing a comparison between right now and Revenge of the Sith. But Jane said, well, let's not compare it to Revenge of the Sith. Let's compare it to The Force Awakens. Many, many years ago, there were a bunch of fascists who tried to take over the world, um, just like the Empire did in Star Wars. They were defeated, and then generations later, some of these wannabes sort of came along and tried to do the same thing, but ultimately failed. And I think, and Jane's argument was, we have the opportunity, as it says in The Last Jedi, to be the spark. As Admiral Holdo says, we are the spark that will restore the Republic. And Jane's like, be that spark.
Mm.
So, yeah, Jane, they know what they're talking about. And I like that comparison because I had not considered that, yeah, it's kind of like The Force Awakens. And you're probably aware, John, that there have been, for a few years, a lot of questions of what's the sequel trilogy all about? And I think that it's about the legacy of that. It's about the good and the bad that goes along with the legacy of traumatic events, and that there are still some things that need resolved, even all those years later. And that the sequel trilogy is really about concluding that story,
Mm.
because there's always going to be those people who want to come in and send things back kind of to a bad place that they were. And, when you have Ray and Finn and Paul and all the good people that stood up against it, then you win.
Mm.
What are your thoughts on the sequel trilogy and how it might relate to the overall feeling right now?
Um, I definitely agree that we can see ourselves in that sort of moment, just as much, if not as well as seeing it in the moment of when Liberty dies and everything like that. um, I really liked that comparison that Jane made. Um, and yeah, I mean, I love the sequel trilogy because I think I've said before, like the personal journeys of like Luke Skywalker and Ray Skywalker are very like personally meaningful to me. Um, and I think that's a big important piece of those stories and of Star Wars is, you know, finding your spot in it, in the story, in life, and everything like that. I think we all can relate to Ray when she's saying that, I need to find my place. I don't know who I am. What's my purpose? What am I
Yeah.
supposed to do? Um, but yeah, I agree with you too that the sequels are definitely about legacy because the thing we all grew up believing and how Star Wars seemed to be as a story was that Luke Skywalker defeated the Emperor and the day was saved and everything was happily ever after. But unlike that story and unlike life, it doesn't just end with a single moment or a single victory. Unfortunately,
Mhm.
um, that doesn't devalue Luke Skywalker's journey. It doesn't devalue that moment. That is still powerful, and that needed to happen. Um, you know, I've always been a believer that when it comes to the idea of the chosen one, when it comes to the idea of the balance of the force, it's a very of that moment, almost of that generation kind of thing.
Yes.
um, and so when Luke talks about that, for a time there was balance, I think that if you had to translate that from mysticism to reality, I think it means like, yeah, Palpatine was dead, the Empire was gone. And so for a while, everybody was cool about that. And then there were all of a sudden some people that saw an opportunity because power hates a vacuum. Um, it's just, story wise, we didn't realize that the power that was trying to take over from Palpatine was also Palpatine. Um,
It's the same evil in
it's
every
just,
generation.
well, and I think I think there's a sort of story point you could make of that. I don't think that was J.J. Abrams' purpose, but you could almost say that of like it's the same evil. Like we act like um, you know, we act like current presidents are different than Reagan, and we act like Reagan is different than Hitler, and we act like Hitler is different than you know Genghis Khan. We act like all of the evil in the world is different from each other and somehow better or worse or whatever. It's the same evil, just wrapped in a different package. Um,
Yeah.
and I don't mean that to take sides or be upsetting when it comes to politics or anything, but um, what we see is just like you know the reason the sequel trilogy exists is because at the end of the day, there's always going to be more dark. There's always going to be more evil, more people choosing to be selfish rather than selfless, and people believing that they're better than other people, and so forth and so on. But just like there's always going to be evil and dark, there's always going to be light. And so for his time, Anakin had the opportunity to be the chosen one, and he failed. Um, and because for his time, Luke Skywalker had the opportunity and chose to save his father, Anakin had a second chance, and together they brought balance to the Force for their time, their generation, their legacy. But you fast forward 30 years, and now there's a new opportunity for light to fight dark, and it's Rey's choice. Um, and you know what? 30 more years, 50 more years, whoever knows, there's going to be another opportunity. It doesn't end with Luke, it doesn't end with Rey. It just keeps going because at the end of the day, life keeps going. So we right now have an opportunity to choose the kind of people we're going to be and the kind of life we're going to live.
Mhm.
And we only can control that as long as we have control, which is only as long as we're alive. Eventually, the torch is going to pass to the next generation and the next generation.
Mhm.
And every generation and every person of that generation is going to have their opportunity to make the choice of the kind of people they want to be and the kind of world they want to live in. Um, and I think that that's kind of that's one of the many ways we can view the sequel trilogy is that realization of, oh, Luke Skywalker did save the day,
Mhm.
um, and now it's my turn, like um, it's not going to end with me, but I still have a choice to make, and um, there's still uh, repercussions to the choices that I make. Um, and that, I think that's something that I see. That's why I see a lot of myself in Ray Skywalker is the
Yeah.
idea of choosing who you want to be, being more than your blood, and being able to, no matter how the cards are dealt to you, you can still shuffle the deck. Like, no matter what, she had every opportunity and reason to be just another Palpatine, and she chose not to be. And I'm always inspired by that. And when I'm most hopeless, um, which thankfully with meds and therapy is few and far between now.
Therapy is a good thing. I know.
um, but I still have my days, but I'm reminded that I can.
As do I.
Yeah, everybody does, and the, that's the whole thing. Is it's just like none of us are perfect, none of us are impervious. Um, and so on the hard days, we can still choose to keep going, to start over, to whatever. But it's not chosen for us; we choose it. And so yeah, I love that the comparisons to the sequel trilogy to right now because I think it's more inspiring. Um, the
Yes,
comparison,
as easy as it is to say, "Oh no, it's Revenge of the Sith."
well, the
Which is like, well, yes, that's true, but it's
100%.
from a certain point of view, to quote Obi-Wan.
Right. It's true. But I think sequel trilogy is more inspiring
Yeah,
because we as fans of the original trilogy and prequels know that that's 20 years under the Empire.
yeah,
Well, 23 really. Um, I don't want to go through 23 years of this. you know,
neither do I.
um, I'd much rather be inspired to continue to do what I think is right and be a part of groups of people that continue to do what is right so that um, just by the mere actions of doing the right thing, we resist whatever person or institution would try to steer our country in a different direction.
Mhm. It's very well said. I couldn't have put it any better myself, I think. But you mentioned choice. Um, Star Wars has always been the story of making a choice. Luke thought, well, I'd go and save the princess, but, I'd rather go back to the farm and just do my usual thing. My uncle's gonna kill me. But then, I mean, obviously the choice unfortunately has to be made for him, but that moment when he returns to Obi-Wan, and that great shot of him looking up and saying, I want to learn the ways of the Force. That's the moment of choice. It's a I'm choosing to do something about it and not just be a passive observer.
Mm-hmm.
And in the real world, a lot of the choices we make are very small. Like my choice to have a podcast every week. Is that going to change the world? Maybe not. But if enough people do that together, and obviously our little community has plenty of people like me and you, who are like, well, we don't know if this is going to make a massive difference, but it's going to make a little difference. And enough little difference can lead to big difference. And certainly, I know that you probably feel the same way, that we're very proud of our little community.
Oh yeah, for
of
sure.
other little groups of friends and, playing each other in silly trivia matches and being on each other's shows and just sharing our love of Star Wars and stuff. Yeah,
That's
it's
what
wonderful.
that's what makes everything better is that the community and the relationships you have. I think that's what helps keep perspective. Um, I think it it's harder to it's harder to be completely hopeless when you are surrounded by that kind of community. Um,
Yeah,
and I don't mean that in like a judgy way of like how dare you be hopeless. Like on any given day, there's plenty of reason to be upset and frustrated and
yeah.
hopeless.
All you have to do is look at the news. It's like, oh no.
Exactly, and it's fed to us with the little rectangle in our hands. I mean, um, so I just simply mean in the realism of life right now, it's very easy to be hopeless. Um, but it's the relationships, it's the friendships, it's the weird little stories we watch and read, and it's all of these things that kind of help keep it at bay. Um, but it is 100%. It matters that we do try to keep it at bay, because that's what keeps it from washing over us, is choosing to continue to be inspired by these stories, choosing to stay connected to positive and uplifting people, because with the more we choose those things, the more it fills us with positivity and hope, and then the more filled we are, the more we pass that on.
Yeah.
um, I shared it earlier today, a great quote, which he's not saying anything anybody else hasn't said, but Henry Rollins, who is punk royalty to those who know, um,
Hmm.
just shared a thing about like the greatest way you resist current events isn't with little actions or with votes or things like that. Those things are important, but really what's more important is how you live your life. And ultimately, the loudest thing you'll ever say is the way you live your life. And you don't understand how that affects the people around you. And as they do it, it affects the people around them. And then all of a sudden, we actually have a real change on our hands. Um, and
Yeah.
that's very relevant and true right now.
Yeah, I agree. That is a profound statement. That's a very profound statement. Is it's how you live your life.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think we all try. I try as much as I can to be um what a Christian should be, particularly right now. As we know, there are some people who use that religious label, but it's like, well, that's a meaningless label if you don't live that way. So I try my best to live that way. Do I always succeed? No, but I guess, I'm trying. And Star Wars always has taught us to try. Um, or in the case of Yoda, do. And I think that we're all doing right now. We're all reaching out to each other, checking on each other, saying, "Hey, are you okay?" Particularly some of the scary news. Cooper's not here currently, but I definitely, and I'm sure you do. They are the ones that might be affected the most, I guess.
Yeah,
And
I
so
mean,
it's always good to reach out to them, make sure they're okay.
for sure. Well, and yeah, I mean, it's definitely scary to be trans right now.
Mm.
Um, but um, there's a lot of people that other people think shouldn't exist,
Mhm.
trans or you know of certain nationalities and races and
Yeah.
creeds. And, um, it's up to the people that don't have as hard of a time existing in this world uh, to speak for those who are constantly fighting to exist in this world.
Those whose voices have been diminished.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And to different degrees. I mean, people don't realize sometimes the influence they have. I mean, um, again, even just amongst your friends, when someone says something kind of racist, you can be the positive influence to say, hey, that's not okay. Here's why.
Mhm.
Um, because ultimately, I think in those instances, more change will happen for some people when it comes from a friend or an acquaintance than it will from some stranger. You know,
Yeah.
someone saying, hey, that's inappropriate. It will sometimes check you more than some stranger on the internet saying,
Hmm.
don't do this, don't say that, stuff like that. So,
Yeah. It's really about the personal touch. I think this is all of this, everything we've been talking about. It's all about that one person making that one choice.
mhm,
And I think that, I mean, we all know at the end of the day, we're all just individuals. And we're all just like, our voices might not be that loud in the world, but each person has to choose to be better, I
mhm,
think. And Star Wars has always taught us you can be better. And as we've seen, it's never too late to
right.
make the right choice.
Yep. You can
We've
be
seen
better
this with Reva, we've seen this with Anakin,
no matter what, no
so
matter
many characters.
100%.
So, as we sort of come toward the end, I wanted to talk about how Star Wars makes us happy.
Mhm.
It makes us laugh, it makes us happy. What's a moment for you that every time you see it, no matter what, it makes you laugh in
Ooh,
Star Wars?
there's a few. I'm definitely experiencing the ADHD of uh, when you ask me, I can't recall it,
Oh,
but
yeah,
but I mean, so I'll probably ramble through it, but I mean, there's several moments in the Phantom Menace, mostly with Jar Jar, um,
yeah.
that will
Yes.
tickle me. um, you know,
For the
the,
record, I love that movie. I really
oh yeah,
do.
it's my favorite. I mean,
Yeah.
if you had asked like something in Star Wars that just always makes you happy, I just would have said all of the Phantom Menace.
Yes. Yeah, yeah.
I mean, I put that on, you know, when I'm having a particularly rough day, or when I don't know what I need, but I feel like I need something visually to kind of shock my system.
Yeah.
I always turn to that because it instantly turns me back into a child sitting in front of the TV watching Star Wars.
Yep.
Uh,
Or a good pal Jar Jar thing excused me. I mean, as much as it drove everyone crazy 25 years ago, I don't know. I kind of like that a little bit. But I enjoy that line. Even when
oh,
he says how wooed, even though that was lifted from Full House.
right.
I don't know. It just makes me giggle.
um, well, and that's the thing, especially in the Phantom Menace with Jar Jar, is he's so innocent that it's silly and it's presented so earnestly that you can't help but laugh because it's just like he really means it. He really thinks what he thinks.
Yeah,
There's no ulterior motive to Jar Jar.
yeah,
He's
and
just
let's cross our fingers that he will be back in Star Wars in some way.
that. I would love that. That would be great. Um,
Can you imagine if that's where Grogu is going with Master Duck?
right. It'd be funny.
That
Yeah.
would be hilarious.
The two greatest Ahmed Best characters
It
are
it it,
responsible for Grogu.
it would be hilarious, and I would also probably burst out crying.
Oh yeah.
And just just one of
I'm
those like
I'm not
nostalgic
emotional.
kick in the heart.
Oh yeah. Um but yeah, I mean there's several Jar Jar moments with the original trilogy. I love C3PO and R2's bickering. That never gets
Oh
old.
gosh,
It,
that's brilliant.
it always makes me smile.
Yeah.
Um Solo's full of a lot of
Oh yeah.
great moments that always make me laugh. I love the shower scene.
Oh my gosh. We should have
Uh,
picked a bigger shower.
yeah, I love you're how old? You look great.
Great. Yeah.
um well and actually matter of fact, Alden's Han Solo and um Harrison's Han in The Force Awakens are probably my two favorite Han Solo portrayals because I think they
Yes.
get that that right level of humor and cynicism and sarcasm.
And yet ultimately heartfelt.
Oh yeah, they both make that a really unexpected right decision in the end. Um, but I can't help but laugh when it's like that's not how the force works.
That's a good. I mean, Harrison Ford is
Well,
is
I
Harrison Ford.
yeah, and I like that upon coming back in episode 7, I think he leaned into because he's not shy about the fact that it's just a job to him. It's nothing special.
Yeah.
Um, but I like that he leaned into the fact of how silly Star Wars is. I think that helped his
Yeah.
performance because he didn't play it so serious. Because I would say Han Solo in A New Hope is very straight played. And I think he slowly unravels from there with Harrison Ford. Um, ultimately getting to the point to where it's almost indistinguishable Han from Harrison in episode 7.
Mhm.
But then you get great moments like in The Rise of Skywalker with Han Solo. One of my favorite Star Wars moments ever. So,
Oh my gosh, that moment is extraordinary.
yeah.
Um, it's somebody put it this way to get a little biblical here. The Peter in the Bible denies Jesus 3 times. After Jesus is resurrected, Jesus asks him 3 times, "Do you love me?" You
Mm.
know, and and it's sort of the redemption of Saint Peter.
Hmm.
This is very similar because we know that things did not go well the last time that Juan and Ben Solo met each other.
Right.
But this was a moment to redo it and
Yeah.
say, what would you have done if you had made the right choice?
Right. Yeah, I hadn't drawn the conclusion because it is a parallel. It's, the interaction with Jesus after his resurrection versus the night of his arrest. It's the same scenario, same
Yeah,
with Ben and Han, which
I have to give credit to Jess Bauer. That was her. That
that's
was
a
something she said. So,
that's a nice observation because I mean, um, the reality we think we have different questions, different answers when it comes to stuff like that of the kind of the right thing. Um, when in reality, it's the same question asked in a little bit of a different way. So the
yeah,
answer the answer's still the same, you
Yeah.
know. Um, and so that's what I've always loved about it is the choice he makes in that moment is the same one he could have made before. It's the same opportunity. Um,
Next time he makes the right choice.
yeah, well, and that's the whole point. Is it's not like I mentioned earlier. It's never too late. It's never um, which it's stuff like that too that makes me happy with Star Wars. I mean, as like emotional as all of that is, those are some of my favorite moments as well. Are the ones that are the gut punches and the challenging ones.
Yeah. And I always say this, boldly. Rise of Skywalker was the greatest movie theater experience I ever had.
Mm,
We certainly know that to some people it was quite the opposite. There's plenty of videos on YouTube. Don't look them up.
oh yeah.
I would say to anybody, don't look that up. No, but it was great because those emotional things. I know that as far as humor, the scene that always makes me giggle is when L337 and Kira are in the cockpit of the Millennium Falcon, and L3 is saying that Lando's in love with her. It, it, it just it's just one of those like completely ridiculous but brilliant scenes.
Hmm.
And the more that you know Phoebe Waller-Bridge, the more you go, yeah, that's her style of humor. But yeah, there's the good stuff there. I love, of course, the um, like the Han Solo original trilogy. I don't know, fly casual,
Yeah, right.
that whole bit is great. Anytime he's really trying to use his Han swagger to get through something, but everything is going wrong.
Hmm.
Yeah, that always gets me when he's trying to use that bravado to
Hmm.
talk his way through any situation, and it usually backfires.
For sure.
Boring conversation anyway. And you're right. I think Alden Ehrenreich and Solo did a fantastic job. Solo's got a lot of very funny moments,
Oh yeah.
particularly with Lando and Han. Well, anything with Lando
Yeah,
is inherently entertaining just because he's so, Billy D and Donald Glover are full of so much swagger that it's absolutely brilliant. So there's so many moments that are just pure entertainment.
hmm,
And certainly we can always dive into the deeper meanings of things. But sometimes when it just comes to plain old entertainment, Star Wars has some of the most entertaining moments in it of any movie series that I can think of. It's just pure fun, and I think that right now we need the fun, we need the joy.
absolutely.
Even if we just want to turn our brains off and watch something entertaining, Star Wars has it all. Mm.
You're right. Well, that was what I was gonna say. Was it magnificently Star Wars has it all.
It does. And then when it comes to hope, I mean, what's the last line of Rogue One? Hope.
Hmm.
Which is great because Andor season 2 which will probably be as depressing as you can. But we know that it's going to end with the beginning of the mission to get the Death Star plans.
Hmm.
And when that gets delivered to Leia, and she says hope, which then leads us into a new hope.
Hmm.
We know that as dark as Andor is, it's leading to hope. In all the Star Wars shows, I mean, that sunset shot that became so famous after A New Hope, that's a moment of hope. That's looking up. And in fact, it's interesting because in Rogue One, Saw Gerrera, played brilliantly by Forrest Whitaker, says to Jin, "You can stand to see the Imperial flag reign across the galaxy?" She says, "It's not a problem if you don't look up."
Mm.
And then you take that and you take that context into the sunset scene. It's Luke looking up.
Mm.
And that's really what it's about at the end of the day is you can either keep your eyes down and just go along with it, or you can look up. And I was listening to a sermon the other day where the lesson was it's better to look up.
Mm.
And that's what Star Wars is really all about is I mean, as we saw in Luke's final moments before his death, what's he doing? He's looking up into the
Hmm.
sky. And that's really what Star Wars to me is all about at the end is look up. There's
Yeah.
reason. There's a reason to be hopeful. Yeah. So that's really my thoughts about what Star Wars is really all about. What are your thoughts on the, as we conclude, on just finding the joy and the hope of Star Wars in a nutshell?
Mm. Well, I mean, I think it's there if you look for it, and I think the great thing about Star Wars is there's so much to look at, and you'll you might find yourself in different characters and different moments throughout it all. But I think
Hmm.
if you're struggling with putting to words your feelings or with what to do with your feelings or with understanding your feelings, I think if you sit down and kind of digest Star Wars of any kind, you'll find yourself there. And the great thing about that is I think that you'll not only find yourself there, but you'll be inspired with what to do with it. Um, because every story is unique and great, but it's also the same thing over and over.
Hmm.
So it doesn't matter what Star Wars you watch or what Star Wars is your favorite or any of that. It's all the same thing over and over. And all you've got to take from it really is like you said, Brennan. I think that the point is to look up and realize that there is hope. It you might not have all the answers. It might not, give you a well thought out thesis of a plan, but it'll point you in the direction, I think. And like George Lucas himself once said about the whole point of it is just, choosing to be a good person, choosing to do good, not do evil. Um, what that looks like might be different for each and every one of us each moment, but I mean, I think we all have that opportunity, and Star Wars just reminds us of that.
Yeah. Yes, I think you said it very well. It's about those little choices to be good, help people, you
Hmm.
know, whatever form that takes, go and help people. You
Exactly.
can either choose to do that or not. And it's your choice, and hopefully you make the right one.
Hmm.
One final thought I have is a line that has really stood out to me recently. In The Last Jedi, Admiral Holdo quotes Leia. It says, "When I served under Leia, she would say, 'Hope is like the sun. If you only believe in it when you can see it, you never make it through the night.'"
Mm.
That's kind of what I think a lot of people are feeling right now is, yeah, there's a lot of stuff that's got people pretty scared right now. And it's easy to go, well, I can't see the sun. I can't see the hope. So much for that. And then you lose any sense of hope.
Mm.
But in a way, it's like if you remember what it felt like to see the sun, if you believe it's still there, even behind those dark clouds, then you'll get through it. If you don't believe in that, well, it that's kind of the end. So
Mm.
that's really to me right now an extremely powerful moral.
For sure.
Is that hope is like the sun, and also, and I certainly, you may recall in there's a story in the I think it's the Book of Kings in the Bible where Elisha the prophet is in a city and they're being besieged by the enemy. And his servant says, "What are we going to do?" He says, "Those that be with us are more than they that be with them." Which reminds me of that great scene in The Rise of Skywalker when Poe thinks everything has gone wrong.
Mm.
And suddenly you hear Lando's voice saying, "There's more of us."
Hmm.
And then there's that huge fleet,
Yeah.
including a few favorite ships,
Yeah.
of more good people stepping up. And that's what we have the opportunity to do now,
Exactly.
is be those good people who stand up.
Hmm.
And as you and I agree, we have such a wonderful community of good people who are
Mm.
standing up for their friends, standing up for hope,
Mm.
standing up for a better tomorrow. And I think that Star Wars again and again, as you say, reinforces that idea.
Hmm.
Well, and that's kind of our thoughts. Anyhow, give our love to Cooper.
Absolutely will.
We miss them very much, and we definitely are literally. My prayers are with them right now. Not just in that nebulous sense of prayers, but in a literal sense.
Yeah,
Because if anyone needs it right now, it's them.
for sure. Much appreciated, buddy.
Yeah. Well, thank you, John, so much for coming on the show.
Always a pleasure.
It's always good to see you. It's been a little. Everything was going like. It's almost like the universe didn't want this episode to happen.
Not to the right time.
Because it was like, I got sick, and then
I got
your work schedule and
thing after
both
thing.
of our mental healths were kind of. I think think mental health definitely was out
For
of whack as a result of being sick.
Yeah,
And so everything which way was like, it's almost like the dark side of the force is on.
it was working against us.
It's like, we don't want them to have an episode together. But yeah, thankfully we did. And I think the timing could not have been more perfect
Right, for
or
sure.
imperfect, depending on
Yeah,
your point of view. Um,
right.
yeah, thank you so much for joining me. Where can everyone find you?
Of course, buddy. Mostly on Blue Sky right now. Duke Trooper 117. It's pretty
I
much.
love all your Transformers posts.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. I'm pretty much almost exclusively there. I still am using Instagram. Mostly just for like toy photography and everything like that. But everything I post on Instagram is on my Blue Sky, and all my rambling that I did here is pretty much what you'll see there. So, yeah, definitely give me a follow. I'll definitely follow back. I always love growing the community over there.
Indeed. And where can we find Cooper?
Pretty much the same at Buppenheim, um, Boop Heim, however you spell that.
And
uh,
their Dracula posts.
yes, they're definitely very strong into the Dracula era right now, thanks to Nosferatu. Um, but yeah, so insane cryptic messages and ramblings from them are over there on Blue Sky mostly. Um, I think I think Coop's pretty much off Facebook and Instagram at this point. Thanks, Mark Zuckerberg.
Certainly blame them.
Right. So, but we're trying to really make the most of Blue Sky. It seems to be a really cool little community right now. So hopefully it stays that way and keeps growing.
Yeah, it is indeed. It's quite fun to be on there and see all the positivity and the togetherness that's on there.
Very very refreshing.
And the great exodus. I'm
I'm
still on there, but I'm starting to wonder if it's time to close that one down.
Yeah, I keep my handle over there just because there's so many people I follow that haven't moved off of there, and I don't want to lose like their art or their creative stuff. So like
Yeah,
I understand the need for it to keep existing, but I definitely won't be using it again unless Elon is dethroned from there.
we can only hope.
Yeah,
Speaking of hope,
exactly. There you go.
anyhow, yeah, you all know where you can find me. Um, Always with my silly Star Wars posts and my weekly spiritually uplifting, or at least attempt to be spiritually uplifting post. And hopefully I'm just glad for John and Cooper for putting up with a religious nut like me.
Oh, you're fine, buddy.
But I do what I can to shall we say, correct the narrative.
Oh yeah. If
Like,
if more were like you, it'd be a better world.
yeah, so I tried. Not always perfect, but if Star Wars has taught us anything, you can always try to do better.
Exactly.
All right. Well, thank you, John, and give our love to Cooper.
Will do.
And thank you, everyone, for listening. My name is Brennan. That noise you're hearing is the ventilator. Thank you for tuning in to Page Turn if they were not, and The Guest Awakens with John Wilcox.
That's me.
May the Force be with you.